You're listening to Friends and Family Capital's First Principles Finance. Our goal is simple: keep you building. Each episode, we discuss tactical questions from our network. I'm Colin Anderson, founding partner of Friends and Family Capital and the former CFO of Palantir Technologies. After years in the trenches, we'll explore the scar tissue, frameworks, and insights that help entrepreneurs turn finance into a force multiplier. Let's jump in. We got a great question this week that I want to touch on. It really comes down to secondary transactions and tenders. Actually multiple founders have come to me and said, hey, I'm thinking about a tender offer. What do you think? How do I run it? What should I consider? This particular case was sort of around the time where you're a few years in. You've still got a small team, maybe a couple hundred people, but they've been working hard. They haven't seen any liquidity. You're now starting to see some of that appreciation and life comes up. So how do you handle that? Well, let's jump through the first principles and then we'll touch on my answers to this tactical example and hopefully you can find some value there. One important thing to flag before we jump in, this is often a quiet conversation or something that people don't talk about. It's compensation, it gets in their bones, there's some mystique around it. So the goal here is really just to show where the fruit on the tree is, talk about this from a first principles perspective, and you can take away and use tools that work for you and your company, and you can ignore the rest. So let's jump in. So let's look at the first principles that govern any sort of tender offer. I want to start just with the three groups of constituents that matter, and we'll really just look at this through that lens. Tender offers, by definition, are transactions that you offer to a large group of people, typically your employees. So I'm going to start with the employees. I think that's a great first category. Next, selling the stock also, founders, you're also the ones kind of making the decision, so we'll do that. And then lastly, who's buying the stock? That's the investors. We'll hit that one too. Taking them in order. On the employee side, this is really a chance to tell people that have been grinding for a very long time, like, hey, good job. You've created value. Let's take some of that value off the table so that you can live your life. Now, the key first principle there is how do they stay focused on the mission, but also live the life that they need? So this is paying back student loans. This is paying for a house. This is paying for a school. This is paying for a wedding. It could be anything, but just life happens. And it's a lot easier to focus on the mission when you can take care of the life. It doesn't mean you're taking everything off the table. It doesn't mean you're blowing out of the stock and you're not aligned with everyone else around the table. It just means you're going to live life. And I actually found that it helps you focus more versus focus less. And that's sort of a key first principle to manage that tension. The other piece that I've seen happen more recently on the employee side, you've seen larger companies, especially hyperscalers, the AI dollars, picking off top talent. And we've seen a lot of founders say, hey, you know what? I actually need to give some liquidity to show people that this stock isn't just paper money, but it's real, because they're getting offers at other companies where it's a higher guaranteed salary, or it's RSUs that are perceived as more liquid. So we've seen this be a more tactical tool, especially recently on the employee side. Great. Let's jump into the founders. On founders, again, you're very much aligned with your employees. You've been grinding by definition longer than your employee number one. You also want to take something off the table. You also want to stay focused on the mission. I would say the key consideration there, in addition to the employee side, is pass the Wall Street Journal test. Now, what I mean by that is if the world read about the transaction that you're proposing, especially if your employees read about it, would they be happy? Would they be motivated? And what I've seen work best in practice there is actually founders go last. There's the saying, generals eat last. Make sure your people are fed, then you get to eat. And you can backstop the tender, you can do all this other things, but I think it's a pretty bad fact if your employees get cut back and you get to sell a bunch. So I'd say take that into consideration as you're thinking about the overall dynamics. Last one, investors. Obviously, you can't do a transaction unless you have a buyer. So this is an important one. Investors often just want more of the stock. That's a great fact. They're not trying to blow up the long-term cap gains of the employees and the founders, though. So one way that I've seen work is flip the shares that are sold actually to preferred. That's what investors actually want. It does increase the pref stack of a company. That's the key trade-off. But the positive benefit is it's easier for investors to swallow. And for employees and for founders, it's a positive fact when you're saying, well, was this compensatory income? The tender offer by definition was facilitated through the company. Does this start to look like it was actually compensatory income, taxed at ordinary income rates? Or is it still cap gains, probably long-term cap gains, because it was really an arm's length transaction by someone who just wanted more stock? So we've seen that come into play more recently as well, where you just flip it. It's a small increase in the pref stack depending on the size of your tender, but it can be a very good fact to protect the income that you have. Obviously, this isn't tax advice, so check with your tax advisor, but want to show where the fruit on the tree is for that one, because I think it's an important thing that we've seen more recently out in the wild. Let's jump into the specific example on the founder who asked me about the tender offer question. In this case, received it a few times. It's been either a late Series A company, a Series B, or a Series C. But the core thing, it doesn't matter what letter you are. What matters is how long have you been in the grind and how much value has been created. And what's the surface area of the number of employees that could be eligible. First thing, and tactically, I'd say, what tools do you use to ask the following questions that I'm going to raise? Now, the specific tool that I would say, let's not do statistics, let's do calculus. You have it's probably in Carta or Pulley or something else. You know exactly who has what grants, what's been vested, and how long they've been there. So you can very targeted go in and say, hey, if I did X amount of dollars, X percentage of sales, according to this population that's allowed to participate, where does the money go? And I would always, as we go through this, say, hey, does the recommendation I want in practice actually get the money to the people that I need and enough to be meaningful for them? Because you're going to do a whole lot of work on a tender offer. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of attention. Make sure the juice is worth the squeeze and that you're actually happy with the results. So first and foremost, don't do statistics. Really do the calculus, run the analysis. That'll make you much happier at the end of the day. Now that we know the tools we're using, what are the questions we should ask? The first one that always comes up is who can participate? A lot of times this is framed between, is it you have to have been here for a certain time period? Is it anyone can participate? Those are sort of the key demographics. What I've seen in practice, just with the market speaking, you can let almost anyone participate because really it self-selects. If you haven't been there for at least a year, your shares probably haven't cliffed. So it's irrelevant. It's moot. So why cut them off and create a two-class structure? If someone's only been there, between the cliff and year two, they probably don't have that much vested and there hasn't been that much value appreciation in the stock because they haven't been there that long. So again, you might not need to carve them out and create the two-class system. You can just say, hey, everyone can participate. And I think the market will take care of it. And if there is someone who really needs that money, then they might actually appreciate it. But again, this is philosophical. Let people think about it. I've seen it done both ways. For me, it was just easier to say, hey, everyone can participate. Here's the rules. Great. So that's participation. Now it's all right. What can you actually sell? And this generally, it'd say, look, you have to have ownership of the stock, right? So it has to be vested. It's not just granted. And then you can look at it. Is this as a percentage of what's been granted? Is this a percentage of what's vested? Now, younger in a company's life, so if you're closer to that Series A, it's probably what's been granted, subject that it's already vested, right? You can't sell what you don't have. The longer you are in your life, you can probably make it where it's just a percentage of vested because the math is going to start to work out and it solves that secondary check of, okay, subject to it, it's granted and it's vested. So it's just easier math on the back end. But really, both are fine. I've seen them in both ways. The key thing, again, is get the money to the people who are feeling the pain so that they can stay focused on the mission. Next, you get into the question of how much are they allowed to sell? This sometimes is a percentage. Sometimes I've seen it as a dollar amount. When we put it into practice, we actually did both. So we did what's a percentage subject to a dollar limit. And our thought there was, let's set a percentage where it's enough to live your life, but also stay focused on the mission. So live your life. This is pay for school. This is pay for a wedding. This is pay back student loans, down payment on a house, whatever the thing is that has come up in the 5 years you've been in the trenches, pay for it. That lets you actually stay focused on the mission and keep going. We ended up choosing numbers. I forget what the exact ones were, but start small. They can go bigger over time because you're probably not going to just have one of these. It's good when things go up. So I think we started at 10% and then it might have gone up to 12%, but that was where the math worked out in our particular case. Check your math. You've got your Carta cap table. You'll know who needs what and when. That's the key thing on percentages. The other piece, dollars. The goal here is not to have people phone in rich the next day and stop showing up to work. The goal is to help people stay focused on the mission while paying for life. So pick the amount that feels right for your area, your team, whatever your compensation is. So if you have lower cash comp, you might want to raise this amount. If you have higher cash comp, maybe you want to reduce it. It's really up to you. The last question people get is, how often can I do this? And how firm should I be on that commitment? Now, look, I think these things are episodic. They take a lot of time. They also take a lot of focus. So what I would say is you probably don't need to do one less than a year. And then, a year is probably good, but sometimes the markets are weird. Obviously, in this case, you need an investor to want to buy the stock. And sometimes investors are open for business. Sometimes they're closed for business, depending on the volatility and the levels in the market. So I'd say give a range is probably more beneficial than every 12 months we will do it. I like to tell people, look, every 12 to 18 months is probably enough because you can count on it. It's far enough out that you don't know exactly what the expense that you're going to need for your life is. It's far enough out that you can create more value. So the stock will probably be worth more there if all the employees do their job. And then it's also close enough that you don't feel like you have to take something off the table now for those unforeseen expenses. So I think about really the first principles of life, not necessarily it's got to be some sort of strict thing. Also, the last thing you want to do is make a commitment to people. You're standing on your stage, talking to your whole company, and you say, we're going to do it every 12 months. Fast forward, suddenly the markets aren't there, the dollars aren't there. Now you've let people down. So I think be really clear on your intention, but also clear on what you can control and what you cannot control. The other piece there on what you cannot control, there's some implications here. It's more accounting nuance, so we don't really have to go into it. There's a school of thought that says if you commit to doing a tender offer, then actually you're backstopping that with company dollars. And that opens up a whole weird mess of, is this actually equity accounting or is this liability accounting? And if it's liability accounting, it seems like it's guaranteed, and that could have an implication on the tax treatment of the equity that the employees actually sell. Moving it again, that very bad situation from is it long-term cap gains to is it short-term compensatory ordinary income. So my rule of thumb is don't commit to doing it because one, you can't, you don't have the money. What you can commit to is, hey, my intent is to do it every 12 to 18 months. My intent is to have them look very similar to this, but there's some things that I just can't control. And so if those change, I'll be very clear and honest with you. I just can't make that commitment that I'm going to do it every single time in this exact way. One, it's true. And two, it helps protect employees from onerous tax treatment. Again, message from our friends in legal, not tax advice. You should talk to your accountant. You should talk to your tax advisors. But that's something that I've found important as I've been working with founders. So in conclusion, let's pull all this together. You want to do a tender offer. You want to take care of your employees. That's the right intent. I'd say really make sure that you're getting the dollars to meet the intent of what you want to solve. I want to make sure that you do it in a clear communication way that meets the goal of what you want to do, but also says what you'd like to do in the future, but doesn't commit you to something that's important for a few reasons. And again, the first principle is really just keep people focused on the mission, but also help them live life. If you do that, you actually will find you probably are re-energized, recommit to the mission, and you can achieve greater heights together. I want to throw all this out there because I think a lot of people don't talk about this. There are important considerations. Again, talk to your tax advisor, talk to your accounting firm, talk to your lawyers. But that's the fruit on the trees. Secondary liquidity in the form of tender offers are a great tool for founders to have to get the employees what they need, investors what they want, and keep building together. So thank you very much. See you next time. Thanks for listening to Friends and Family Capital's First Principles Finance. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating on Apple or Spotify. It helps our founders and finance leaders find the show, and it helps us course correct as we build. We appreciate you listening. See you next time.
A note from our friends in legal. The views expressed here are those of the individual Friends and Family Capital Management, F&FC, personnel quoted, and are not necessarily the views of F&FC or its affiliates. All opinions expressed herein by F&FC personnel or guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinion of F&FC. Opinions are subject to change without notice. This content is for information purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.